stage. Welcome to the Jason Wright Show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. So I got to tell you, every once in a while, I have a guest on that I've got a little touch of envy for, and you fit that bill, man. And I'll tell you, the reason why is because you have found a way to monetize a number of things that I am incredibly passionate about. One, I can tell you are into superfoods, whole foods, and understanding what it means to take care of our bodies using food as medicine, and then also high quality chocolate and cacao in particular. I got the most amazing care package from you. I have been trying to, I mean, I've only had it for a day and already I'm trying to not just sample every single kind you sent me. So I guess let's start there with how did your journey into health, wellness, and all these amazing things that all tie back to nutrition? How did this start for you?
When I was growing up in Southern California, my parents were trying to do the best they could health wise with the knowledge they had at the time. And we were born in '89. So, growing up in the early and mid '90s. And I was raised on a vegetarian diet, but not an ultra healthy one by any means. It was more looking like basmati rice and tofu 5 nights a week, and maybe one night of pizza and one night of pasta. And that was kind of done on repeat for my whole childhood. And I wasn't ill. I wasn't generally unhealthy. I was a pretty happy kid. But I always noticed, whether it was in school or in sports, that I would perform pretty well. But there was always this highest 5 to 10% that I couldn't quite break into in terms of performance. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt that I had more potential. I just didn't know how to tap into it. And when I was getting into my teen years, my parents had a wellness center where they were really ahead of their time. They had infrared heated jade massage beds. They had infrared saunas way before that was such a popular thing like it is today. They had naturopaths doing consultations there for people. They had all kinds of things happening. Turbosonic sound vibration machines, which is like a power plate but uses actual sound waves to move the body. So it was a very cool place to grow up, working the front desk essentially. And I would really start to hear a lot about these concepts that people were talking about there, in terms of that you shouldn't wait until you get sick to start working on your health, that you should take a proactive approach. The old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of a cure. And I would see these people coming in there. They were typically in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they would come in with all kinds of issues, whether it was back pain or fatigue or stress, or maybe they had prostate problems or liver issues, Lyme disease, whatever it may be. And I saw so many people having dramatic transformations. And they were all excited and talking about these same concepts of prevention rather than looking for a cure. But I realized, wait a second, they're not really living that. They are coming in here already having gotten sick and then using holistic methods to get better, which is great and certainly most likely better than whatever mainstream medical alternative would have been offered to them, if any at all. But they did wait until they got sick, and then they're using all these things to fix themselves. What happens if I, at this ripe old age of 14, start doing all this stuff now? What does this mean for the rest of my life? Do I never get sick? Do I live to be 120? Do I get to keep surfing until I'm 90 years old? Because that's my biggest passion and something I want to stay able to do as long as possible. Does it mean I have enhanced cognitive performance as an adult? What does it mean? I didn't know, but I was certainly excited about the possibilities. So I started getting into everything that I could. And I didn't really have an example of anyone who was doing all these things that I was thinking about. So I was just kind of living in this world of hopes and potentials and aspirations, until this one guy from the local community came in one day, and he was in his 40s. He looked like he could have been in his 20s. And he had this protein product that he wanted my parents to consider selling at their wellness center. And it was hemp protein and spirulina, chlorella, some other Western herbs like milk thistle, a few adaptogens like astragalus was one of the things in there. And this is the first person who was kind of the living example of what I had in mind. He looked 20 years younger than his driver's license said. He was super smart. The guy was absolutely jacked, in incredible shape. And I said, okay, I want to know what he's doing, because that's what I'm shooting for. Let's map this out. And he said he was having this superfood mix for 2 out of his 3 meals of the day. So I said, all right, let's go. Let's do it. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just started blending it up with some Tropicana orange juice with some frozen berries and maybe a frozen banana. And it tasted so bad. It was like absolute dirt. I didn't care though. I wanted the results so bad that I would just stick a straw all the way to the back of my mouth and just suck this thing down, trying to bypass my taste buds. And after a pretty short period of time, I started realizing I'm feeling amazing. I have like this clear, natural high going on. And this is incredible. And if I've been missing out on this all these years, what else have I been missing out on? And that kind of shot me off down this rabbit hole of wanting to learn more and research more into these different ingredients and other possible exotic ingredients from around the world. And the more I would learn, the more I would incorporate, the better I would feel. The better I'd feel, the more I'd want to go learn more. And this kind of started this cycle that basically continued to this day, being obsessed with how can I optimize my life from the things that I put in my body.
Man, I would say you're definitely fortunate in that your folks were doing kinda like the biohack center before there was such thing as, there was no Dave Asprey and his Upgrade Labs or anything like that. Are they still in that business by chance?
They no longer have a brick and mortar. They sold that business and then transitioned to uh, selling infrared saunas as a
Ah,
kind of an offshoot of that business. So, and I still participate in that side of things as well. So I'm a big passionate infrared sauna user
well,
myself.
that's good to know because I'm in the market, so we need to talk about that whenever we get offline, and because
Oh, for sure,
I just ordered a new chiller for my ice bath, and of course, I'm a big Juve light guy, so I do
sure.
infrared every morning, and now my wife and we are actually shopping for saunas, and so, I would love to talk to you about that. And aren't you let's just, I wanna talk way more about addictive health and everything you got going on, but don't you think it's great that, like, what your parents were doing back in the day, where I guarantee you now, of course, they're out in California, so it wasn't quite as unusual, but there's always been this stigma around holistic medicine and functional medicine, but don't you think that we're finally turning a corner where people are more receptive to the non-pharmaceutical routes of health and wellness?
Very much so. I think I've kind of seen both sides of how the shift has happened. Back during the time when my parents were doing this, and even a little bit before, it was looked at if you were into natural health and biohacking before that
Mm.
became a term, as you said, you were looked at as being a little bit kooky, a little bit strange, kind of odd. And now you can talk to people about this stuff and they're a little bit more interested. And I think part of it is that it's just expanded a little bit more, little by little, into the mainstream. And also, as time goes by and the food supply gets even worse, there's so many more crazy threats to our health from the outside. It gets to where you can't get away with not thinking about your health and being an active participant in your health journey like you used to. Back in, say, like the 50s, you could kind of just cruise along and do pretty much okay. I can think back to my grandparents. They lived to be in their 80s and 90s, and they tried to be active and fit and things like this, but they weren't having to think about health all the time. Whereas now, if you're not on top of it, you're going to be possibly in trouble. Something could sneak up on you that it could really take you down and significantly compromise your quality of life.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is there's so many people that I talk to these days, and they're really ignorant to the fact that we have so much more agency over our health and wellness than what a lot of people realize. And I get frustrated. I was just having this conversation yesterday or the day before with a guy who he's a real estate guy. I used to own real estate brokerages, and that's where we met, and we've become longtime friends. And but now he goes out and either acquires or builds clinics that are more integrative health type facilities. And we were talking about it, and were mentioning how one of the things that's happening in Western medicine, in particular in America right now, is a lot of these family care physicians or primary care physicians, they're getting burnout and they want to do something that is more healthcare related versus sick care. A lot of them don't know how. And I think, Sage, a lot of the products you bring to market and the reasons you bring them to market, and like understanding the benefits of different mushrooms, like whether it's chaga or something like that. A lot of these physicians, man, They have no clue because whenever they're in medical school, they have such a the the amount of time they spend on nutrition is so minute and minimal compared to all the other training they're getting. It's really crazy, isn't it?
It sure is. It's a minuscule amount of training, and some of them, thank goodness, come out and have an awakening that they're just modulating people's symptoms as they're already sick. And there's been such a surge in interest in the field of functional medicine and people becoming functional medicine doctors in recent years that it's inspiring to see. But certainly, the average person who just goes to the doctor that they're connected with by their health insurance and thinks that they're going to really help them to get radically
Yeah.
healthier, they're in for a rude awakening,
All
unfortunately.
right. So you start at a very young age. I mean, 14 years old, that's pretty young, but also you grew up around it. You decide now to, at what time do you decide, you know what, of all the different ways I can make a living, I'm going to make my living in health and wellness and I want to create a product. What was the product? Because I mean, your background is, I mean, you understand things like with herbs and all these other things that I've never even really touched the surface on. So tell me what it was that that was the first thing that you were like, you know what? I'm going to take this. I'm going to put my flag in the ground and say, this is what I'm going to do for delivering a healthier product to the market and fulfill my dream of being healthy and well and being able to surf as long as I can, as well as turn this into a vocation. What was the first thing that you pursued?
So you can only do something that's really benefiting yourself, as I was, starting to consume different superfoods. And that term doesn't mean as much as it used to. I feel like when I got into it, it really meant a food that was simultaneously ultra nutritional in like the top 1% of nutritional density and also had a lot of medicinal properties to it as well. Now it's been kind of taken up by Whole Foods to mean basically any plant based food they will call a superfood. So it's kind of lost its meaning, but I still try to use it a little bit because it really meant something to me at the time that I was getting into all this. And you can only do something like this for so long without wanting to share it with those around you. It's the hero's journey of going out to slay your own personal dragons, and then you want to come back and share what you've learned and found with your community. The problem was that my community was my high school and college friends, and taking nutrition seriously was the last thing they were interested in. It was the height of the opioid epidemic, and they were way more interested in having Percocets and Oxycontin than having hemp seeds and spirulina. So I was really careful about how to do this because I didn't want to lose my friends by being the weird guy who's telling them, hey, stop drinking and try having my superfood smoothie instead. So I was very reserved about it, didn't talk about it too much. But then we were on a surf trip in Costa Rica one year, and I was with a couple of my friends, and I would make these superfood smoothies as we were traveling. And I brought my little magic bullet blender with me, if anybody
Oh
remembers
yeah.
those from 10 or 15 years ago. And I had I brought my superfood powders, and I would get some local fruit and things like that, and just blend it up. Tasted as bad as ever, but I was in it for the benefits. And we would go out and surf, and they would want to stay out in the water 2, maybe 3 hours, but then they would get tired. They'd want to come in and rest and eat and just chill out. I would want to stay out 4, 5, 6 hours. It was like, this weather is amazing. The water is 85 degrees. The waves are great. What are you guys doing? We're here. Let's get in the water. And they saw the one thing that I was doing differently was having these drinks every day, a couple times a day. And they eventually said, hey, could you maybe make me one of those? And I had to contain my excitement because this is the moment I've been waiting for years, wanting to be invited to share the area of one of my greatest passions with my closest friends. And so I said, yeah, of course we can. And so I blended up the drinks and I served it to each of them, and it didn't go well. The problem was, one, I had forgotten how bad it tasted because I was just so focused on the benefits, just drink this thing down, feel amazing. I didn't realize that they were not going to be ready for that. And they had a hard time getting it down. And then it was a situation where they were quite toxic from this overall college experience of drinking and drugs. And when you take something that's quite powerfully detoxifying and you have a lot of toxic burden in your system, sometimes your body's going to mobilize those toxins out as quickly as possible. And sometimes that's via the same route they came back, or that they came in through in the first place. So a couple of them were vomiting within minutes. And this is a moment of realization for me that if I'm going to really have serious benefit on those around me, whether it's my closest friends, my family, or the larger world, long term, I have to figure out how to do this differently because this didn't work. So I'm going to have to figure out how to take the healthiest ingredients in the world and deliver them in a way that is such a great food or drink experience that people will want to have it simply because it's so enjoyable, and it just so happens to be massively healthy as an afterthought. And I didn't know how I would do this at the time, but as my learning went on, I started learning more about cacao or the raw chocolate beans as an elite superfood, as being the highest natural source of magnesium, a great source of chromium, one of the highest natural sources of chromium, um, the highest natural source of antioxidants, great source of also more exotic compounds like serotonin and anandamide and phenylethylamine, things that make you feel happier. And I thought, okay, this is amazing. First of all, I can enjoy delicious chocolate if made right and have it be something healthy. This could be like not just for me great, but the gateway superfood that I can share chocolate with my friends. They're not going to think I'm a weirdo for that as long as I can make it taste really good. And then the other part was I was learning more and more about traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And a lot of these herbs, especially some of the mushrooms that we talk about, like reishi mushroom and chaga mushroom, have strong bitter flavors to them. And those bitter elements in there are the most medicinal compounds. So if you get a reishi or a chaga that's not bitter, you got to think, okay, this is actually not very potent. So most people in the Western world have not been raised to have a taste for bitter foods. Bitter has been pretty much bred out of our domesticated food supply. So it's hard to introduce bitter foods to people. But randomly, the one bitter flavor that people seem to be totally okay with is the bitter of dark chocolate. So I figured out if you can get some of these bitter herbs in the chocolate, you can kind of camouflage them flavor wise there. This creates something that people can be totally open to having. So I saw chocolate as this gateway superfood. I also, with my limited success in romantic areas of life, I thought maybe it could be a cool way to meet girls and say, "Hey, you want to hang out and we can make some chocolate together?" And so that was my idea as well. And that is how I met my girlfriend. And now we've been together 12 and a half years. So that worked
Oh,
out really well. And so it was a combination of those two things. And I was still pursuing actually the idea of a different business model because I love the idea of the elixir bar as a business model where people go to a bar looking place, but it's serving elixir drinks made with all these exotic herbs in a way that tastes amazing, but is totally transformational health wise. And I did a few of these elixir bar setups in five-star hotels around the world. We did one in Paris and one in Sydney. And it was amazing. It was really cool to introduce this novel concept of healthy indulgence to people from around the world. But I was realizing I can only reach so many people in this way. They have to happen through the doors of this specific hotel or that specific hotel and already have some openness and interest. Whereas if I can create a product, that can maybe reach a much wider audience and maximize my beneficial impact on others. And I had been just for fun doing this chocolate, sharing it with others. And more people were saying, "Hey, I'm having a party. Could I buy some of that from you? Or I want to give some gifts to, my coworkers for Christmas. Could I buy some of that for you?" And I kept just continuing to progress along the development of the recipe, making it sugar free and incorporating more and more potent herbal extracts over the years. And it finally got to a place where it's like, okay, I think I'm ready to sit down and put a serious business plan together and see if I can really make this into something.
wow. That's so well, the exciting thing about it is too, you going all the way back to where that started, you remind me of the founders of so many companies. They start making whatever product they become famous for. They started making it because they couldn't find what they wanted in the market, so they just created it themselves. One of my favorite fashion houses is Rag and Bone. I love Rag and Bone clothing, and if you know anything about their founders, that's exactly what Marcus. I can't call his. I think that's his name. I can't. One of the founders, the main founder of Rag and Bone, that's what he did. He couldn't find a pair of jeans that he really, really liked. So he went down to the garment district in New York and bought a bolt of denim and started making his own jeans. And so it's really cool to hear that that's kind of what you did. It's like you were wanting to make something that suited your own needs to an audience of one, knowing that others could benefit from it. I love that just from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Also, so tell me what your the spirulina that you and I probably pronounce that wrong, I always do, but the
No, you're
okay,
spot on.
I use it in I create what's called a green monster. And that's the green in it. I mean, that thing takes over
I
it
like the sound
it
of
takes over
that.
everything, and so I've made that for, some folks, and it has a strong taste. Is there a brand or one that you sell that you recommend above others? I mean, I never know, and there's also in isn't it like that there's 2 different types? One, it has to break the cellular wall to really, to be enhanced. It's like a really, really fine powder. It's almost like a powdery fungus almost, right? I mean, describe that for the audience a little bit, and also tell and just as a fair warning, folks, if you put it in your spirulina in your smoothie or whatever, it's going to turn it dark green, which I like because it makes me feel like I'm eating something really healthy. But two, it's gonna kind of dominate the taste profile. But is there a particular one, Sage, that you prefer? And let's sit on that a little bit to tell people why having that extra chlorophyll and everything, why that makes such a difference in our body and our health.
Yeah, just to give people a little background on what spirulina is, because I think it's a small percentage of people who have ever heard of it.
Exactly.
Spirulina is a blue-green algae, traditionally consumed actually going back hundreds, if not thousands of years, both in the Lake Chad region of Africa and in what was traditionally Lake Texcoco in Mexico, which was later basically Mexico City, where we have Mexico City now, used to be a very watery kind of like swampy type area or lake type area, depending on exactly where you were. And it was later filled in to build a city. But back in the day, that's where they used to grow spirulina, and this was a major protein source for them. Spirulina is actually the highest natural protein source in the world, and you have between 65 to 71% protein. And the one that I personally like to use, it's not something I sell. I have no financial involvement in it, but it's from a company called Nutrex
Okay.
Hawaii. That's based out of Hawaii, as it sounds. And it's a blue-green algae. And so the green is, of course, chlorophyll. That's this natural plant sunlight energy that is so beneficial, so cleansing. And then you have the blue, which is what's even more interesting. The blue is something called phycocyanin. And this was originally researched going back to the 80s and 90s as an adjunctive treatment for people going through lymphoma cancer treatment and going through chemotherapy. And it also has the ability to increase stem cell production within the bone marrow, which is pretty fascinating. And so you see a lot these days this product being sold called blue spirulina. And that's a confusing name, and I don't really like the name because it's kind of misleading. It makes it sound like it's a kind of spirulina that just so happens to grow blue, whereas in fact that is the phycocyanin that's been extracted from the spirulina. It's great. I just don't like the naming strategy on it. But also, the thing to be aware of is there are some unscrupulous spirulina vendors out there these days who are extracting the blue out of the spirulina, selling that, and then selling what appears to be whole spirulina, but in fact is something that's had that blue removed from it. So they're kind of double dipping, so to speak. And one thing that's cool about the company Nutrex Hawaii out of Hawaii is that they sell just whole spirulina. They don't do any of the blue spirulina extraction, so you know what you're getting is full. And you can even test it out. You can take multiple different spirulinas, put a little bit in a cup or a bowl of water, and just let it sit. And over time, you will see the blue and the green separate out. And if you see a good amount of blue, that's how you know you've got a great spirulina. If there's little to no blue showing up, you have a spirulina that's been messed with.
Very cool. All right, and just so everybody knows, if you go to Addictive Wellness and you click on some of Sage's favorite things, go on the About Sage resources, and I just went and I put it in my cart through your links there, Sage. So
Oh,
I'll
cool.
grab some of that, and I'll also put this in the show notes as well. Yeah, I think I first heard about spirulina from Brian Johnson, Blueprint guy. I think it's one of the
Uh-huh.
things he
Yeah.
puts in his, and I started doing the research on it, and then one of my business partners, Dr. Gus Vickery, he's an MD. He is the example of one of these family care physicians of 3 decades that finally decided I want to focus more on keeping people healthy versus doing the diagnose and prescribe deal. And so we talked about it. He's the one who helped me understand the benefits of it. So I think that's really cool. Now, let's just go through some of these things from a tactical standpoint, because here's the thing, Sage, you know as well as I do. A lot of people, and it's great. I'm like you. When people ask me a question about some of these things that are, you know, whenever you start getting questions beyond, should I take creatine or, which creatine, I'm all in. I'm bullish on creatine.
Yeah,
But
same.
but when they start asking about things like chaga and lion's mane and these things that, you know, that to me, I like to be able to go a step deeper. In fact, I did a series on my podcast one time. So one time it was just these monologues, and I did it for myself as much as anything, where I would take one supplement or some nutraceutical or something, and I would describe, okay, like NAC. Here is why you would take NAC. Here is the impact on your body. So that, because I'm real big on, especially now that I'm the co-founder of a nutraceutical company, I don't want people to come to me and say, what supplement should I take? Without being able to say, here's the reason why. And first, I always start out with, like, on the supplement side, like your products, I think everyone should take all the time because they're maintaining health and they're natural. While our products have a lot of natural things in them for different reasons, I always say, well, show me your blood work first before I tell you what supplementation you need. But all of that to say, tell some folks, like, let's go through like some of the chocolate bars. Let's just go there. Cause like I said, I got this amazing sampling from you. And I want to know, like, people that hear this, they probably listen to podcasts and they've heard, if you listen to Tim Ferriss, then you've heard of Four Sigmatic, right? Which really did a good job of bringing chaga with lion's mane to the general public and an understanding of it. Go through some of those bars, some of the things that they contain, and why somebody would need that in their diet, for cognitive health, for blood sugar regulation. Kind of just give some of the actual utility value of some of these things that are in your products.
Sure. So in our line of chocolates, we have created different functional chocolates as opposed to having different
I love
flavors.
that.
I'm so passionate about these different traditional tonic herb adaptogens that I wanted them to be the stars of the show, and this to be a way to introduce people to them and then start understanding which herbs they liked and which herbs really worked for them. And then if they like, they can keep having them in the chocolate, or they can also take them as individual herbal extracts that we offer. So, for example, one of our most popular sellers over the course of our business has been our energy drink. And this, people initially sometimes will say, oh, what, you just add caffeine in there? What are you doing? And I said, no, it's not that. We use herbs in here that are going to increase your body's own natural energy production capabilities. So as an example, in our energy chocolate, you have cordyceps. This is a fungus that some people are afraid is going to turn them into zombies. But in fact, that's just the storyline of a kind of funny TV series. Whereas in reality, what's going to happen is that it improves your oxygen utilization. So more oxygen from what you breathe is getting to your blood, it's getting to your muscles, is getting to your brain. And it also contains a compound called cordycepin, which is a very similar compound in structure to ATP. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that is pure cellular energy. So what we're working on is increasing cellular energy production at the level of the mitochondria, which is the power plant in all of your cells that's producing your energy. Cordyceps also has great effects on the immune system. It's traditionally regarded as a lung tonic, and modern research has also shown that it can help with many kinds of different illnesses and maladies that could affect the lungs. Then also in there you have ashwagandha, jumping from the Chinese herb to the Ayurvedic herb side to go over to the other side of the Himalayas. This improves strength and speed and endurance and overall energy production. But at the same time, it's decreasing stress and anxiety. It's kind of the ultimate adaptogen in that way, really balancing things out. It's helping with thyroid health. So a lot of people who are lethargic, it can sometimes be, especially women, that they have a sluggish thyroid that needs a little bit of support. And then ashwagandha is also supporting hormone health. So not just the thyroid, but also things like testosterone health, especially in men. And then you have also in there astragalus, which is an elite chi tonic. This is in the Taoist understanding, your moment-to-moment energy, vitality, cognitive function, immune system function. Again, not stimulating you, just allowing your body to go out and produce more energy. Because these days, everyone's, dealing with a lot of challenges in modern life and could all use a little bit more energy. Then you get into other things like our tranquility chocolate. Now, this is something you could take in the morning because you got a stressful day, or it's something you could take in the evening because the herbs in there aren't sedatives. They're just going to make you feel a bit more peaceful. So you have something in there like reishi mushroom, which is maybe the single best herb, in my opinion, if it's a high quality, high potency reishi, for bringing down stress and anxiety. Again, an amazing immune system supportive herb. It's not stimulating your immune system. It's not suppressing your immune system. It's adaptogenic. It's dual directional, meaning that if your immune system is overactive, it's going to help to bring it back under control. If your immune system is overactive, it's going to help to bring it back under control. If your immune
And
system is
the thing I'm
underactive,
sitting here
it's going to
looking
help
to
to
at
bring
the
it back to life.
website, whenever you, and folks, this is Addictive Wellness. The thing I'm doing this because one, these products I am tearing into. I love the fact that, by the way, Sage, that you actually have the cacao powder and nibs. I'm going to order those from you. But here's the thing that the listener needs to know as you go across here: sugar-free, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo-friendly, GMO-free, nut-free, keto-friendly, and made with love. So I would imagine that means that you're making sure on fair trade and all the things that and sustainability that people care about whenever they're sourcing their different products. And it's and I can tell you, man, um, it's the prices. I mean, for it to be such a boutique feel of product, and especially when you get into really high quality cacaos and chocolates, dude. I mean, it can get pretty expensive, but I mean, your prices are not bad at all either. I don't know how you're doing it, but those prices I mean, chock full of all the goodies that these things have, that's pretty freaking amazing.
Thank you. We do our best to maximize our efficiency in terms of our production to control the cost side of things. But it's been a crazy year, I'll tell you, in the cacao world, because what happened is that the last year they had kind of an El Nino type rain event in Africa, where the majority of the world's cacao is produced. And as a result of that, they lost most of their crop. Well, what happens when you take away a whole ton of the supply of the cacao of the world? Whatever you have left, the demand is still there, so that the price is going to go way up. So historically, you can look back decades, and pretty consistently, the commodity market price of cacao per ton has ranged between $2,500 and $3,000, and it's just kind of bounces around in that zone. This year, if you look at the chart, it just skyrocketed up to like between 8 and 10,000. Now it's been fluctuating. So it's been kind of a wild year in that regard, but we're doing our best to not pass on that as much as possible to the customer. We're trying to absorb it as much as we can to keep the cacao affordable, and hopefully we ride it out and things get back to normal pretty
So,
soon.
Sage, one of the things about cacao too that to look for something to kind of equate it to, not all virgin olive oils are created equal. If there's something that there's a few foods that one I always tell people buy the highest quality food your budget will allow. Eat organic as much as you can. But there's some different products that I say you really stretch for the absolute best. One of them being extra virgin olive oil, another is cacao. So, to help these consumers that are listening to this podcast be a little bit more educated, why is it important to get a high quality cacao like that which you are using in your products at Addictive Wellness?
There's really a huge spectrum of quality when it comes to the cacao world. You can have something that's grown on a plantation in soil that's been deprived of nutrients, and that cacao can be of a variety that has been heavily hybridized to maximize the quantity that is produced. But with that, you lose a lot of the quality, not just in flavor, but also in nutrient density. And that can be harvested by slaves, and it can be put into a chocolate bar with heavily processed ingredients of all sorts. And you can have a bar of chocolate like that. Or what we've done is to try to go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum in every way possible. So the cacao that we use is really something unique. It is not even grown on a farm or a plantation. This is something that is wild harvested. So we work with a network of people that have access to certain wild lands in Ecuador where cacao naturally grows. These are heirloom trees that nobody planted there. They've just been growing there for often 40, 60, sometimes even 80 years. They're 20 plus feet tall trees. And the yield on these is certainly much lower, but the quality is something else. It's growing in volcanic soils. So you have minerals that have been brought up from way deep down within the earth. And when you look at the composition of the cacao, not only are you going to be looking at something nutritionally superior, but what's not there is mold toxins. So whenever you have something, I think, that is really pulled far away from nature and forced into a farming, into a domestication, you're going to run higher risk of mold. A place where you see this also in like kind of the most domesticated and heavily hybridized food is grain. Where do we have huge mold toxicity problems in our modern diet? In all the grain food sources. But it's also a huge issue with cacao. And so pretty much all chocolate products out there are going to have mycotoxins in them. And these are toxins that are a byproduct of mold that has been growing. You won't test for any mold still present in it because in most situations, people are roasting the beans before processing them, and that kills the mold, but the mycotoxins are still there. And mycotoxins, this is the metabolic byproduct of that mold. It's basically like mold poop that's still coming into your body. And so it's a huge issue, and people more and more are becoming very sensitive to these things. And as a result, we go to the original, to the heirloom, to the genetic cacao that has evolved in this survival of the fittest environment where you don't have fences around a farm. You're not being monocropped. You are not having special fertilizers and resources provided to you to prop you up. It's kind of the difference between having a kid who has helicopter parents kind of smoothing out the whole path for him and making sure that life is super easy versus a kid who had to kind of, go through some challenging times. One kid is when adversity hits is not going to know how to deal with it. The other one is just going to take it in stride. And so with this cacao, it says no to mold. And so because of the source of these beans, we have no mycotoxins in any of our final products. And so the other thing that comes from this is heavy metal toxicity. A lot of cacao is grown in areas that have been exposed to a lot of pollution and contamination. They're areas where there's been a lot of mining done, especially in places, some in Ecuador, some in Peru, a lot throughout Central America as well, of course, Africa. And as a result of this mining, you have lots of toxicity in the soil. Well, when you go into wildlands, you don't have this. You still end up with some trace amounts of metals, perhaps, that are at extremely, extremely low levels. You can't quite get to zero. It's just a reality of nature because there are some organic metals occurring within the soil, but the levels are infinitely lower than what you would see with a lot of these plantation grown products. And so very clean in that respect. And then we want to keep it pure all the way through. So we're not adding any sugars. We're sweetening with very clean sugar-free sweeteners, specifically organic allulose and organic monk fruit. So when I was, first getting into eating healthy chocolates back in my teens, you could only eat a certain amount before it was like, okay, that's too much sugar now. We got to back off. And I wanted to remove that ceiling to maximize people's ability to keep enjoying the chocolate.
I love that. And the cool thing too is, so I guess it's Logan Paul and Mr. Beast, have kind of come under fire for these lunchly things that they've put out there for kids. It's like supposedly something like healthier lunch. And it's a bunch of crap that they're putting in these things. They're really, really bad. As far as just the ingredients. I mean, not saying that Mr. Beast and Logan Paul are bad people. I'm just saying that these things are not healthy. It's kind of like the Lunchables that a lot of you parents out there, I know it's real easy to go to the grocery store and grab some Lunchables, but those are not the healthiest thing to give your kids. One of the things that I was listening to Ben Greenfield talk about this a long time ago. It was during one of his Q&A sessions, and someone was asking him, so what do you do whenever your kids go to like a party and they want to eat birthday cake or something? And he said, well, it's not that they don't ever eat birthday cake, but at a very young age, what I would do is I would send them to the party with some really high quality, with a high content of cacao chocolate bar or something like that. And if you introduce these really high quality, quote unquote, treats at an early age, then your kids will develop a palate for that and they'll crave that. That's one of the things that I tried to introduce my children to very early on, was really, and then probably not as much because I wasn't as steeped in the nutritional side of things. But for you parents out there, these chocolate bars taste amazing. And if you will start to educate your children and let them develop an educated palate at a young age for these high quality foods, it makes a big difference. And one of the things too, Sage, and the reason why I wanted to talk about what you just described with regard to the different quality of cacaos, I think that's one of the things, coffee is kind of the same way. Coffee is notorious for mold content, especially even if you're buying good organic, Pete's or something that's pretty good. I mean, or your Purity Coffee makes some good ones. It's just hard to keep the molds out. And so if you're somebody that, again, you're taking NAC or niacin and you're taking these products to try to increase your glutathione, which is your master antioxidant, to try to, make sure that you're eating all these blueberries. Well, don't work against yourself by buying low quality products that are going to be full of toxins and just kind of put you at net zero, and work against what you're trying to do. And so that's why I wanted you to talk about that. Now, something I said there, I reminded myself that I wanted to ask you about with your bars. What is the cacao percentage content? And when people are shopping for chocolate, why is it important for them to, what does that mean? A lot of people will see that. They'll go to Drug Emporium or they'll go to a really high-end chocolate shop and they'll see 70% cacao, 40% cacao, 65%. What does that mean? And what should the content level be before it's really reaching a really strong level for pure cacao content?
Ours varies by the chocolate bar, but it usually averages in the 70s to 80s. Um, Typically, you do want something in that higher range, and the higher the number, it means that you have more cacao and less other ingredients in there. However, to be honest, I'm not the hugest fan of cacao percentage as a metric for quality of a chocolate bar. The reason is it's one metric and it can tell you some things. However, it won't tell you what the quality of that cacao is to begin with. So you could have completely non-organic, very heavily hybridized, like a CCN 51 variety, which is like the worst of the worst. It could have you could have it sweetened with a very concentrated sweetener, something like an Ace K or aspartame that you use a small amount, and so you could have like a 99% cacao bar with the worst cacao, full of mycotoxins and sweetened with aspartame. And somebody could say, I eat 99% cacao. I am super healthy. However, there's nothing, there's not that much healthy about it. It also doesn't tell you the ratio of cacao paste to cacao butter that's used in the bar. And so you could have a white chocolate bar that's 99% cacao, but get in there a whole host of these beneficial compounds that are contained in the darker pigmented parts of the cacao. You're just getting the oil part, which has its benefits of its own, but nothing like what is coming from the whole bean. So it's certainly something to look at as an initial signal of what's going on. But also, for an example, in our case, you have to think about what is comprising the rest of the percent. And I think that's really the big question. Number one, what's the quality of the cacao that's forming that percentage? And number two, what forms the other percent? If it's really crappy ingredients, yeah, you want to maximize the cacao to squeeze out those bad ingredients. But what if those other ingredients are actually healthier for you even than the cacao? Well, then maybe you can afford to give up a few percentages to our old friends chaga mushroom and reishi mushroom and cordyceps and astragalus and ashwagandha.
Yeah, no, I think that is the really cool thing about your product is that's the very thing is I'm sitting here looking again at all these incredible ingredients that yours have that would make up for some of the taste. Again, if you're putting that chaga in there that has that nice bitter flavor that kind of has almost like the as far as I'm thinking of the flavor complex, like kind of a coffee-ish, chocolatey, whatever. There's so many things you're putting in there that all blend well together. It's actually kind of genius. I mean, I don't do you have many competitors out there doing this, Sage? I mean, you're the first company I know of, and I'm surprised because, like I said, I consume high quality cacao every single day in one of my protein shakes, and then my snacks of choice are something like Alter Eco or something like that, or now Addictive Wellness
Sure.
bars to get that good high quality cacao. Is there anybody competing with you really and putting these adaptogens in here?
Yeah, there are a couple companies starting to put adaptogens in chocolates. Nobody quite checks all the bars, or excuse me, all the bars, all
Uh-huh.
the boxes that we do in terms of having the adaptogens, being sugar free, having this level of high quality cacao. We want to, I'm kind of obsessive with this stuff, and so I want it to be perfect from every possible angle of looking at it, and so nobody has quite gone to that level of
Well, and I
craziness.
can tell you, as someone who is like right now, we're in the early stages of authentic health, and so much of the kind of the quality of the product is reflected in the packaging and the way that you just the way it's presented, and it's a beautiful product, man. I'm telling you that I was so impressed whenever you sent me my sampling of product, and you're really on it here. It's fantastic. Now,
Thank you. That's very kind
absolutely.
of you.
Well, I think we've given the audience a great education on cacao and what you guys are doing, but I want to know more about you and just because I love geeking out on this stuff. So besides eating
Awesome.
unbelievable cacao and understanding the need for adaptogens and all these other things, what do you do to stay healthy? What are some of the best practices that you could share with this audience as someone who is running a business, is in health and wellness? What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to keep yourself at the top of your game?
Well, nutrition is, of course, going to be a huge component of it. And as much as I would love to just be able to eat nothing but chocolate all the time, and I've created an amazing life for myself where I do have kind of an unlimited supply of healthy chocolate, which is pretty wild. Um, that is not going to check all the boxes quite. So I want to share my own Green Monster
Yes,
recipe maybe
please
quickly
do.
because as a fellow Green Monster lover, I think you'll appreciate and enjoy this one. So I have quite an intense work life, working both in addictive wellness, working with my family's business, just trying to squeeze the most out of each and every day. So I have time for 2 meals in a day, and that's usually like a late breakfast and a dinner. And I could imagine taking the time off every day in the middle of the day for lunch. So I needed to figure out what can I eat around sometime between 9 and 11 a.m. that is going to totally fuel me and keep me totally satiated and energized until dinner. And there was many years of experimenting that went into this, and I don't know if this would work for 100% of people. It's worth trying. People generally quite like it when they give it a try the first time, but it works for me and the way my metabolism runs. So there's a bread company based out of the Bay Area in California called Grindstone Bakery. They make, in my opinion, the highest quality gluten-free breads because they don't use any kind of starches or like a lot of people will use potato starch or cornstarch in gluten-free products, and those are a nightmare for your blood sugar, and in my opinion, are often going to be worse than actually just consuming a gluten product. So this is all based off of seeds, and so it's primarily quinoa and millet, which are essentially grain-like seeds, and it's all sprouted and fermented, so very easy on the digestion. So I'll take 4 slices of this, pop them in the toaster, and then I'll get a bowl and put 1 avocado from my avocado tree right in the background here for anybody who's watching on the video. And so put that in there. And then I'll do 2 tablespoons of C8 MCT oil, which is basically an extract of coconut oil that's very easily converted by the body into ketones, which are an alternative source of fuel for your mitochondria to glucose. And then I'll put a tablespoon grass-fed ghee, a tablespoon of almond butter, a tablespoon of spirulina, a tablespoon of chlorella, 3 tablespoons of pea protein. That works well for me. It's easy to digest for me. Some people who can do better with dairy might enjoy putting like a grass-fed whey protein in there. And I'll mash that all up to be like a guacamole type consistency. And then the toast will be coming out hot. And I'll put this, you have a thin piece of toast with like an inch thick of this green mush on top. And then I'll put some salt and a blend of different spices ground up on top of that. And to me, it's absolute heaven. I think I've eaten that probably 97% of mornings for the past 8 or 9 years now. So that fuels me all the way until dinner. And so that's a fun way to start the day for me. And in terms of other non-food consumption activities, I mean, their supplementation is something I'm passionate about that we can chat about as well if you like. But in terms of other activities, as we mentioned a bit earlier on, I love using the infrared sauna. I find not only just from a detoxification perspective and a cardiovascular health perspective, but just in terms of stress management, it's a total game changer and just improving your stress resilience. I'm a big fan of getting into cold water as much as possible, and combining that with breathing practices like you find in the Wim Hof method. I think a lot of people try to just go start getting into cold water and just doing cold plunges, and it's tough because they haven't prepared their nervous system. And through breathwork practices like Wim Hof developed, you can pre-train your nervous system to be ready for this and start to allow your body to have other tools to produce that internal fire that you need to counteract the cold. So I'm a big fan of that. I don't encourage anybody to go right into getting into crazy cold water. I think it's like weightlifting, where you go into a gym, you're not going to go and try to bench 300 pounds. You're going to hurt yourself. And so it's about starting gently. It's about starting with 1 minute of kind of chilly water at the end of your shower. And then you go to a little bit colder at the end of your shower next time, a little bit colder the next time. Then when you're all the way cold, then you start doing a minute cold at the start, and then you do hot, and then a minute cold at the end. Then you're doing a 2-minute cold shower. And then you can, start maybe doing a cold bath, or if you have a cold plunge, something like that, and working your way into it. But keep it progressive. Otherwise, it's too much of an assault on your nervous system. When people say, oh, I went out and it was too cold outside and I caught a cold, that's because they are not cold adapted. Their body is not used to the cold. And so that hit of the cold was too much for your immune system and nervous system to handle. Whereas if you build up to it little by little, you can go out for a walk in your underwear in the snow and it's not such a big deal.
100%. Cannot
And
agree
so,
more.
yeah, so a big fan of the hot and the cold. Um, of course, resistance training, and a combination of things like uh, regular weightlifting combined with some kettlebell training. Big fan of those. And overall mobility training. I love surfing, as I mentioned earlier, and that ties into making sure you get lots of time in nature and just get out of the house and get your eyes on things at different distances and amongst a lot of greenery and just the beauty of what the world has laid out for us here.
So, as someone who's optimizing your health and your brain to be as good of a business leader as you possibly be, are there any virtual mentors that you have? Any particular authors that you read, either their blogs? Listen to Andrew Huberman. Kind of, there's the normal stable we could go through of the ones that everybody that kind of swims in the soup that you and I do. That I guarantee we could check a bunch of the same names. But are there any people that you look to for guidance on being able to stay at peak performance as well as be a strong entrepreneur that maybe the audience could benefit from checking out their work?
I wish I had like a great single recommendation for you here. I'm not so sure that I do. I of course have over the years consumed information from the kind of folks you're talking about, the Andrew Hubermans, the Tim Ferriss, et cetera. But I would say at this stage, I'm a little more on the side of learn from the experience and kind of figure it out on the way. Maybe sometimes that means I run headlong into a wall that I could have seen coming had I had a little more mentorship, and maybe that will be a part of the next chapter for me. Is looking more in that mentorship direction as I look to break through to that next stage of growth for
Well,
myself.
but that also indicates a strong growth mindset that you have, that you're willing. Because to me, I'm the same way, and that even though I have all these virtual mentors, and I look to them, what I've learned that just reading every book that, Tim Ferriss or Stephen Kotler or whomever, writes, but not actually going out and put these things into practice, that there's no substitute for actually doing the work, making the mistakes, and having the successes to learn. So I totally get that. Now I do have to go back to the sub. Go
And
ahead.
I
Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, and I just wanted to agree with you there. And I think part of what pushed me a little bit more towards just get out there and figure it out through living the experience is earlier on, like let's say in my late teens, early 20s, I was consuming a lot of these sources of information, reading tons of books, listening to audiobooks, podcasts, all that. And I was finding that when I wanted to tell stories to people, the best stories I had to tell weren't my own. I was like almost defaulting to like, oh, I read in this book that this guy said this thing had happened to him, and it didn't feel s- so cool in a sense. So I was like, okay, I need to get into living life myself so I can have my own stories to tell.
Man, I think that might be one of the biggest golden nuggets going to come out of this podcast. I think that's incredible advice, Sage. That wow, your name is very fitting for that little nugget you just dropped on us right there.
Thank you,
Because
thank you.
seriously, because I mean, I do think I've fallen into that before. Even whenever I'll go to write a blog or something or do a podcast on a different topic, what I'll find is that all I'm doing is regurgitating the experiences and successes that someone else has had. And you know who actually helped me on this immensely? I had the opportunity to go on James Altucher's podcast about a year ago.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
it was fantastic. I love James, and I was telling him he was on one of his mentoring episodes, and he was talking to me, and I told him about how I acquired my first business. It came up in conversation, and the thing he said was, "Wait a minute, you wrote this book," 'cause I'd written a book years ago. He said, "You don't even," he said, "I didn't even know that with that story." He said, "I've looked at your blogs. I've never even seen that story. Why haven't you told that?" I'm like, "Well, James, I don't know. I just, that's not as cool as talking about some story that somebody said." "Yeah, but," he said, "unless you're Ryan Holiday, who writes about these great stories of everybody else, and because it fits into stoicism, you need to tell your stories." And so that's what I've tried to do more of. And I do always encourage people to get out and take the lumps. I mean, as someone who's a recovering fixed mindset guy from my early childhood, I've tried to be and always having to look good as a result of that, wouldn't take those chances and create those stories that you can truly benefit from. So I think that is very key. You didn't like you noticed that you were telling the stories of other people instead of your own stories, so you decided to go out and create your own stories, and I think it's incredible advice, so well done. Um, Absolutely,
Thank you.
man. Now, I do wanna go back, obviously, like I said, I'm a co-founder of a nutraceutical company, so it's kind of a passion of mine. What are some of your core supplements that you make sure that you get in every day, and why?
I have a lot of it based around my genetics. So I had genetic testing done in my early 20s, and that has been hugely helpful in me for me to understand. You can kind of experiment on yourself and see, I think this is working, I think that's working. But when you can have this blueprint of your genetics to understand, it can really accelerate your discovery of the supplements that are really going to work for you. So for me, 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is because I have the MTHFR gene, so I don't metabolize folate that's coming in well. And this is just down the family tree of the metabolic breakdown, so to speak, so I can still get all the benefits of normal folate digestion and also the methylation that I would be missing out on otherwise. And then because I have the COMT++ gene, and I tend to have very high frontal lobe activity, but also the possibility to have a lot of tension in the body and a lot of stress because of it, I take a lot of magnesium, preferably for me in the form of magnesium glycinate, because it's bound to glycine, which is in and of itself also quite relaxing. Then I have, as you can tell, like a lot going on in my life, and I'm pretty passionate and excited and like to have good energy. So 300 milligrams of ubiquinol for mitochondrial health is another one for me. I take krill oil for the phosphorylated omega-3s. I like taking molecular hydrogen. So they're tablets you would dissolve in water to create a hydrogen gas in there. That's a very powerful selective antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. And those are the big ones for me. Depending on time of year and my feeling of immunological vulnerability, we'll also do some zinc. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention D3 and K2 is another big one for me. For those who don't know, D3, of course, everybody has heard of vitamin D. It's so great for hormones, for bone health, etc. But it increases your digestion and absorption of calcium from your diet. And that's great in some ways, but you have to make sure that that calcium is then going to go to your bones and not to your heart and your arteries. So the K2 is in there as kind of the traffic director to help make sure it goes to the right place.
Very good. That's one of the things that, having, a business partner like Dr. Vickery and a mentor as well from that standpoint, I didn't realize the signaling and as you say, I love that description, the traffic director, how important that was. And one of the things I tell this audience a lot, Sage, is when it comes to supplementation, it's not enough if you just take the highlight. You read a blog on, whatever, or somebody's advertising because they've got a great affiliate agreement for some supplement, but you don't know how to make it most effective. Usually it requires a signaling stack. You've got to have this one will work for this, but if you unless you take this, it's not going to work as well. Kind of goes back to what we're talking about. If you can be supplementing with some glutathione, but if you're consuming toxic chocolate or coffee or whatever, then you're working against yourself. It's figuring out how to stack up all the dominoes so that it works properly. That I'll be honest with you, until I got really steeped in all of this health and wellness and this passion of mine, I took that for granted. I didn't understand, the difference, and also didn't understand like where you're out there in
Sure.
beautiful California where you're getting plenty of good natural vitamin D and you're surfing and those sorts of things. Most people are not getting the amount of vitamin D that they need by any means, and so even if they are out in the sun, they probably need some more supplementation and just
Sure. Like even in the winter now, for example, like you can download the D-Minder app on
yeah.
your phone. I highly recommend it to people. And that way you can tell how much vitamin D am I making when I'm out in the sun, because you put into it how much skin is exposed. It can tell from GPS where you are in the world, where the sun is in the sky. And you'll notice that like as we get into the winter, even in Southern California, there's maybe like a 2 or 3 hour window in the middle of the day where you can make any vitamin D. And then when I go out surfing, I'm in a wetsuit. So most of my body's covered up. And so even though I have a very active, very outdoor life, I still need vitamin D supplementation to really stay in a good range throughout the year.
100%. Well, Sage, this has been awesome, man. I could geek out with you for another hour, but I'm sure you got some chocolate to sell, dude. Some cacao to go.
Oh, well, I've been having such a great time with you. I could easily go another hour or two as
Well,
well. Thank
hopefully
you.
this is the last time we talk, man. And please tell this audience how they can keep up with you, where the best place to stay up with Addictive Wellness and buy some of this amazing cacao, these amazing cacao bars that I highly recommend 100%. Where can they find you?
Thank you. So anyone who wants to check out our products, you can find us at addictivewellness.com. And then if you enjoyed some of this information that you've heard me talking about, whether it's about chocolate, about supplementation, overall nutrition and wellness, or adaptogenic herbs, as you can tell, I love talking about it. So you can check out, we have a YouTube channel and an Instagram page where we are posting very regular content. And we also have Q&As all the time. So people can send in questions and we'll, do videos in response, and would love for people to join our community there.
Fantastic. And one more thing, if I could impose upon you, will you email me the recipe for your avocado toast type deal that you talked about that you eat? Yeah,
You got it.
I'd love to share that with
Absolutely.
the audience. I'm going to try it, and maybe I'll film it or something, and we'll do some sort of a collaboration.
Yeah. Little
Yeah,
taste test. Absolutely.
I'm
That sounds
definitely
fun.
that sounds great. I'm going to try that. So, well, Sage, thank you so much for coming on the Jason Wright Show, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and never stop improving. Always and always. He's Sage. I'm Jason, and we are out. Well, that does it for this episode of the Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.